Dr. Maya Chen had always been the type of person who pushed through pain. Growing up on a small farm in Montana, she learned early that animals didn't wait for you to feel better. If the horses needed feeding or the sick calves required medicine, you did what needed to be done no matter how you felt. At 32, Maya ran the only veterinary clinic in Cedar Falls, a town of barely 3,000 people surrounded by endless rolling hills and cattle ranches. She loved her work more than anything else in the world. There was something magical about healing a sick animal, about seeing the relief in a worried farmer's eyes when she told them their prize bull would be fine. But for the past 6 months, something had been wrong with her own body. It started small, the way these things always do. A little stiffness in her joints when she woke up in the morning. Some days she felt more tired than usual, even after a full night's sleep. Her hands would ache after long surgeries, and sometimes her fingers felt swollen and clumsy when she tried to handle delicate instruments. Maya told herself it was normal. She was getting older, working long hours, lifting heavy animals. Everyone got aches and pains. Her father used to complain about his joints all the time before he died when she was 25. She figured it ran in the family. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. Maya arrived at her clinic at 6 in the morning, an hour before her first appointment. She liked the quiet time to review cases and prepare for the day. The autumn air was crisp, and the mountains in the distance were dusted with the first snow of the season. Her first patient was Buster, a golden retriever who had been limping for a week. Maya examined the dog carefully, feeling along his leg for signs of injury. But as she worked, she noticed her own hands were shaking slightly, not from nerves. She had examined thousands of dogs, but from something else she couldn't quite name. By lunchtime, Maya felt like she was walking through thick mud. Every step took enormous effort. Her joints ached so badly that she had to sit down between patients. When she tried to eat her sandwich, her hands were so stiff she could barely hold it. The afternoon brought Mrs. Henderson and her cat, Whiskers, who needed routine vaccinations. Maya had done this procedure hundreds of times. It was simple, straightforward. But when she tried to draw the vaccine into the syringe, her hands wouldn't cooperate. They felt like they belonged to someone else, clumsy and unresponsive. "Doctor, are you feeling all right?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her weathered face creased with concern. "You look awfully pale." Maya forced a smile and finished the vaccination, but Mrs. Henderson's words stuck with her. When the last patient left at 5 o'clock, Maya looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection shocked her. Her skin did look pale, almost gray. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her face seemed thinner than she remembered. That night, Maya barely slept. Her joints ached so badly that she couldn't find a comfortable position. She tried lying on her side, her back, even sitting up in bed. Nothing helped. By morning, she felt like she had been hit by a truck. The next few days blurred together in a haze of pain and exhaustion. Maya canceled several appointments, something she had never done before in her 7 years of practice. She told her assistant, Jenny, that she had the flu, but deep down she knew this was something different. Something worse. On Friday morning, Maya woke up and couldn't get out of bed. Not couldn't. Her body simply refused to cooperate. Her joints were so swollen and painful that even the weight of the blankets felt unbearable. When she tried to call Jenny to cancel her appointments, her voice came out as barely a whisper. Jenny arrived at Maya's small house behind the clinic an hour later, using the spare key Maya had given her for emergencies. What she found scared her badly enough to call an ambulance despite Maya's weak protests. The ride to the regional hospital 30 miles away was a blur of sirens and worried voices. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of paramedics checking her vital signs and talking in urgent tones. She heard words like dehydration and inflammation, but couldn't focus enough to understand what they meant. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses surrounded her bed, running test after test. They drew what felt like gallons of blood, took x-rays of her aching joints, and asked endless questions about her symptoms. Maya answered as best she could, but everything felt distant and unreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Dr. Rodriguez, the internist assigned to her case, was a kind woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a concerned expression. She explained each test as she ordered it, trying to put Maya at ease. But Maya could see the worry in her eyes, the way she frowned when she examined Maya's swollen joints and felt the enlarged lymph nodes in her neck. The waiting was the worst part. Test results took hours or even days to come back, and with each passing hour, Maya felt more frightened. She had always been the one giving medical advice, the one with answers. Being on the other side, the side of not knowing, was terrifying. Jenny visited every day, bringing updates from the clinic and flowers from Maya's garden. Other friends from town stopped by with cards and offers to help, but Maya barely had the energy to thank them. She slept most of the time, a deep, exhausting sleep that left her feeling more tired than before. On the fourth day, Dr. Rodriguez came to her room with a thick file and a serious expression. She pulled up a chair next to Maya's bed and sat down, the way doctors do when they have difficult news to share. "Maya, we've gotten most of your test results back," she began gently. "I know this has been a difficult time not knowing what's wrong, but we have some answers now." Maya tried to sit up straighter in bed, her heart pounding. "What is it?" Dr. Rodriguez opened the file and pulled out several lab reports. "Your blood work shows markers that indicate an autoimmune condition. Specifically, you have what we call systemic lupus erythematosus, or SLE. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Lupus. She knew that word, knew what it meant. Her father had been diagnosed with lupus when she was in college. She had watched him struggle with the disease for 3 years before complications took his life. She had been there when he got too weak to work, when he needed help with simple daily tasks, when he finally couldn't fight anymore. "Are you sure?" Maya whispered, though she already knew the answer. The symptoms all made sense now. The joint pain, the exhaustion, the way her body seemed to be attacking itself. "I'm very sure," Dr. Rodriguez said softly. "The blood tests are quite definitive. Your ANA levels are very high, and you're positive for several other markers we see in lupus patients. The good news is that we caught it relatively early, and there are many more treatment options available now than there were even 10 years ago." But Maya barely heard the words about treatment options. All she could think about was her father, how the disease had slowly stolen everything from him. His energy, his independence, his hope. She remembered the last conversation they had, when he told her he was tired of fighting, tired of being a burden on everyone around him. "How long do I have?" Maya asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Maya, lupus is a serious condition, but it's not a death sentence. Many people with lupus live long, full lives. Yes, there will be challenges, and you'll need to make some changes to manage the disease. But with proper treatment and care, there's no reason you can't continue practicing veterinary medicine and doing the things you love." Maya nodded, but inside she felt like she was drowning. She thought about her clinic, her patients, the life she had built for herself in Cedar Falls. How could she continue caring for animals when she could barely care for herself? How could she be the strong, reliable veterinarian everyone depended on when her own body was betraying her? The next few days passed in a haze of medication adjustments and consultations with specialists. Maya learned about immunosuppressive drugs, anti-inflammatory medications, and lifestyle changes she would need to make. The doctors were optimistic, talking about remission periods and effective management strategies. But Maya couldn't shake the image of her father in his final months. Too weak to get out of bed, dependent on others for everything, she had promised herself she would never put anyone through that, never become a burden the way he had. The thought of living with lupus, of fighting this battle every day for the rest of her life, felt overwhelming. When they finally discharged her after a week in the hospital, Maya felt like a different person than the one who had arrived. She was armed with a bag full of medications, a stack of appointment cards for various specialists, and a list of warning signs to watch for. But she felt fragile, breakable, like she was made of glass that might shatter at any moment. Jenny drove her home to her small house behind the clinic. As they pulled into the driveway, Maya looked at the building where she had spent so many happy hours healing sick animals. For the first time since she opened her practice, she wondered if she would ever set foot inside again as a working veterinarian. "The clinic can wait," Jenny said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "Dr. Williams from the next county over has been covering emergencies, and everyone understands you need time to get better." But Maya wasn't sure she would get better. Lupus wasn't something you recovered from like a broken... 2 weeks after Maya returned home from the hospital, she was still struggling to find her new normal. The medications the doctors had prescribed helped with some of the pain, but they came with their own problems. Some days the steroids made her feel jittery and anxious. Other days, the immunosuppressive drugs left her feeling weak and vulnerable to every cold and flu bug that went around town. Maya had tried to return to work twice, but both attempts ended badly. The first time, she had to sit down in the middle of examining a horse because her legs suddenly felt too weak to support her. The second time, her hands shook so badly during a routine surgery that Jenny had to take over. The humiliation was almost worse than the physical symptoms. On a Thursday morning in early November, Maya was sitting on her back porch wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The cold air felt good on her flushed face, another side effect of the medication. She was trying to work up the energy to shower and get dressed when she heard a truck pull into her driveway. Through the window, she could see it was Jake Moreau, one of her regular clients from the Double R Ranch about 10 miles outside town. Jake brought his horses to her clinic every few months for routine checkups and vaccinations. He was a quiet man, probably in his late 30s, with the kind of weathered hands and sun-lined face that came from a lifetime of outdoor work. Maya liked Jake. He was always polite and respectful, never rushed her examinations, and clearly cared deeply about his animals. But they had never had much personal conversation beyond discussing the health of his horses. She couldn't imagine why he would be at her house at 7 in the morning. Maya quickly threw on a robe over her pajamas and answered the door, hoping she didn't look as awful as she felt. Jake stood on her porch holding his worn cowboy hat in his hands, his expression serious but kind. "Morning, Doc," he said quietly. "I hope I'm not bothering you. Jenny at the clinic said you were taking some time off for health reasons. I wanted to check on you, see if there was anything you needed." Maya was touched by his concern but also embarrassed. She had always prided herself on being strong and independent. Having people worry about her felt strange and uncomfortable. "That's very kind of you, Jake, but I'm fine," she lied, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Just fighting off a bug. I'll be back to work soon." Jake studied her face for a moment, and Maya had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her facade. His dark eyes were intelligent and observant, probably from years of reading the moods and health of animals. "Doc, I don't mean to pry, but you don't look like someone fighting off a bug. You look like someone fighting something a lot harder than that." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She had been trying so hard to pretend everything was normal, to convince herself that she could beat this thing through sheer willpower. But Jake's gentle directness broke through her defenses. "Would you like some coffee?" she heard herself asking. "I was just about to make a pot." Jake's face softened into a small smile. "I'd like that very much." They sat at Maya's kitchen table, steaming mugs between them. And for the first time since her diagnosis, Maya found herself talking honestly about what she was going through. She told Jake about the lupus, about watching her father struggle with the same disease, about her fears for the future. Jake listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking a gentle question. When Maya finished talking, he was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "My sister had lupus," he said finally. "Rebecca. She was diagnosed when she was 25, about 15 years ago." Maya felt her heart sink. "Had?" "She's still alive," Jake said quickly, seeing her expression. "Living in Colorado with her husband and 2 kids. Working as a teacher, last I heard. What I meant was she had lupus, but she didn't let lupus have her, if you know what I mean." "How did she do it?" Maya asked quietly. Jake leaned back in his chair, a distant look in his eyes. "It wasn't easy. There were times when she wanted to give up, when the pain was so bad she couldn't get out of bed for days. Times when she felt like a burden on everyone around her." Maya nodded. She understood those feelings all too well. "But Rebecca had something going for her," Jake continued. "She had people who wouldn't let her give up. Our whole family rallied around her. We learned everything we could about lupus, about what helped and what made it worse. We made sure she never had to fight alone." "That sounds nice," Maya said, trying not to sound bitter. "But I don't have a big family. It's just me." Jake looked at her seriously. "Maybe not by blood, but you've got a whole town full of people who care about you. Doc, everyone remembers when you saved Tom Peterson's prize bull, or when you drove out to the Miller farm in the middle of a blizzard to deliver their foal. You've been taking care of this community for 7 years. Now it's time to let the community take care of you." Maya shook her head. "I appreciate that, Jake, but I can't ask people to—" "You're not asking," Jake interrupted firmly. "I'm offering. We're offering. And I'm not taking no for an answer. Something in his tone made Maya look at him more carefully. There was a determination in his voice that reminded her of her father, back before the lupus took his fighting spirit away. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked cautiously. Jake set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. "Help, whatever kind you need. The physical stuff first. I can handle the heavy lifting around here, take care of any animals you've got at home, help with yard work, groceries, whatever. But also the other stuff. Research, support, making sure you don't have to face this alone. Jake, I can't let you do that. You have your own job, your own life. I won't be a burden on—" "Stop right there," Jake said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not a burden. You're a person going through a tough time who needs help. There's a difference." Maya stared at him, trying to understand why he would make such an offer. They barely knew each other outside of professional interactions. "Why would you do this for me?" Jake was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I watched my sister almost give up when she was first diagnosed. She felt exactly the way you're feeling right now. Scared, alone, like her life was over. And I saw what a difference it made when people stepped up to help her, not out of pity but out of respect for who she was and what she'd done for others." He paused, looking directly into Maya's eyes. "You saved my horse Thunder last spring when he had that bad colic. You spent 4 hours with him. Wouldn't leave until you were sure he was going to be okay. You didn't charge me extra for the emergency call or the overtime. You just did what needed to be done because that's who you are." Maya remembered that night. Thunder had been in terrible pain, and for a while she wasn't sure they would be able to save him. But she had stayed with him, monitoring his condition and adjusting his treatment until the crisis passed. "That's my job," she said quietly. "No," Jake said firmly. "Your job is treating animals during business hours for agreed-upon fees. What you did that night was something more. You cared, and now people want to care about you the same way." Maya felt tears starting to fall, but for the first time in weeks they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. "I don't know how to let people help me," she admitted. "I've always been the one doing the helping." Jake smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. "That's okay. We'll figure it out as we go. The important thing is that you don't give up. This disease doesn't get to win, not without a fight. But what if I can't beat it? What if I end up like my father, too sick to work, too weak to—" "Then we'll deal with that if it happens," Jake said simply. "But we're not there yet. Right now, today, you're still here. You're still fighting. And as long as you're willing to keep fighting, you won't have to do it alone." Maya looked at this man who had appeared at her door like an answer to a prayer she hadn't even known she was praying. There was something solid and dependable about Jake. Something that made her want to believe him when he said everything would be okay. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Jake said gently. "That's normal. Rebecca was scared too, but fear doesn't have to stop you from living." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the morning light grow stronger outside the kitchen window. Maya felt something loosening in her chest, some tight knot of despair that had been choking her since the diagnosis. "Okay," she said finally. "I don't know what this looks like, but okay. I'll try to let you help." Jake's smile could have lit up the whole room. "That's all I'm asking for, one day at a time." As he prepared to leave, Jake turned back to her with a serious expression. "Maya, I want you to know something. This isn't charity and it's not pity. This is what people do for each other when it matters, and you matter to this community more than you know." After Jake left, Maya sat at her kitchen table for a long time, thinking about what he had said. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face this battle completely alone. It was a small feeling, fragile as a new seedling. But it was there. Outside, she could see Jake's truck disappearing down the road toward the Double R Ranch. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in weeks she was curious to find out instead of just afraid. Jake kept his word. The very next morning, Maya woke up to the sound of someone working in her yard. Looking out her bedroom window, she saw him splitting firewood near her back porch, moving with the easy rhythm of someone who had been doing physical work his whole life. Maya's first instinct was to rush outside and tell him to stop, that she could handle her own chores. But when she tried to get out of bed quickly, her joints protested with sharp stabs of pain. The lupus was having what Dr. Rodriguez called a flare, a period when the disease was more active and symptoms got worse. By the time Maya managed to get dressed and make it outside, Jake had stacked a neat pile of split wood on her porch and was checking the latch on her garden gate. "Morning, Doc," he said, tipping his hat. "Hope I didn't wake you. Figured I'd get some of this done before it gets too hot." It was November in Montana. The temperature was barely above freezing. Maya almost smiled despite her mood. "Jake, you don't need to do this," she said, wrapping her robe tighter around her pajamas. "I can take care of my own property." Jake straightened up and looked at her seriously. "I'm sure you can when you're feeling up to it, but today isn't one of those days, is it?" Maya wanted to argue, but the truth was written all over her face. She felt awful. Her hands were so swollen she had trouble buttoning her robe, and every muscle in her body ached like she had the flu. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. "My sister had days like this," Jake said gently. Days when even small tasks felt impossible. She used to try to push through anyway, until we learned that rest during flare-ups actually helped her recover faster. Maya felt tears of frustration prick at her eyes. "I hate this. I hate feeling helpless." Jake set down the hammer he had been using to fix her gate and walked over to her. "You're not helpless. You're sick today. There's a difference." "It doesn't feel different." "I know. But Rebecca taught me something about that too. She said the hardest part wasn't the physical symptoms. It was learning to be okay with having limits." Maya looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Jake thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Before she got sick, Rebecca was like you. Independent, always taking care of everyone else. She was a nurse, worked double shifts, never asked for help with anything. When the lupus hit, she felt like it meant she was weak." "How did she get past that?" "Slowly. And with a lot of help from people who cared about her." Jake picked up his tools and started walking toward his truck. "Why don't you go back inside and rest? I'll be done here in about an hour." Maya wanted to protest, but another wave of fatigue washed over her. "Jake, I can't keep letting you do this. What about your work at the ranch?" "The boss is understanding. I come here early before my shift starts. It's not a problem." As Jake drove away, Maya stood on her porch feeling a complicated mix of gratitude and guilt. She had always been the helper, never the one being helped. Learning to accept assistance felt almost harder than dealing with the physical symptoms of lupus. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Jake would arrive early in the morning to handle any heavy work around Maya's property. He fed her chickens, repaired things that were broken, and made sure she always had enough firewood for her wood-burning stove. He never stayed long or made a big deal about what he was doing. He just quietly took care of things and left. Maya tried to pay him, but Jake refused. "You didn't charge me extra when you saved Thunder," he reminded her. "This is just returning the favor." Slowly, Maya began to trust that Jake wasn't going to disappear when helping her became inconvenient. He showed up even when it was snowing. Even when Maya was having good days and didn't really need help. Even when she was grumpy and difficult because the medications were making her feel sick. One morning in December, Maya woke up feeling better than she had in weeks. The joint pain was minimal, her energy was returning, and for the first time since her diagnosis, she felt like herself again. She was outside feeding her chickens when Jake arrived. "You look better today," he observed, climbing out of his truck. "I feel better. I think I might try going into the clinic for a few hours." Jake nodded approvingly. "That's great, but take it easy, okay? Don't try to do everything at once." Maya was about to assure him that she would be careful when she noticed something concerning. One of her chickens, a red hen named Henrietta, was walking strangely and seemed lethargic. "Something's wrong with Henrietta," Maya said, moving closer to examine the bird. Jake followed her, watching as Maya gently caught the chicken and began her examination. Even feeling better, Maya's hands were still a little stiff and clumsy. When she tried to check the hen's wing, her grip slipped and Henrietta squawked and tried to escape. "Here," Jake said quietly, stepping up beside her. "Let me hold her while you look." Jake's hands were large and gentle, holding the chicken securely without causing stress. Maya was able to complete her examination and determined that Henrietta had a minor wing injury that would heal with rest. "How did you know how to hold her?" "Like that?" Maya asked as they released the hen back into the coop. "Grew up on a ranch. You learn to handle all kinds of animals." Jake paused, studying Maya's face. That felt good, didn't it? Being able to diagnose and help even if you needed a little assistance with the hands-on part. Maya realized he was right. For the first time since her diagnosis, she had felt like a veterinarian again instead of just a sick person. It did feel good. Maybe that's something to think about, Jake suggested. There might be ways to keep doing what you love even if you have to do it a little differently now. That afternoon, Maya did go to the clinic for a few hours. Jenny was thrilled to see her, and they spent time going over cases and catching up on administrative work. Maya found that she could handle most tasks just fine, though she needed to take breaks more frequently than before. When a farmer brought in a sick calf, Maya attempted the examination but found that her hands were too stiff to palpate the animal's abdomen effectively. In the old days, she would have pushed through the discomfort and completed the exam anyway, but remembering how well it had worked with Henrietta that morning, she called Jake. "I know this is unusual," she said when he answered his phone, "but would you be willing to come to the clinic and help me with something?" Jake arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing his work clothes from the ranch. Maya explained what she needed, and Jake stepped in to provide the hands-on examination while Maya guided him through what to look for. "Press a little harder there. Yes, feel that? The intestines feel distended. Now check the temperature." Working together, they were able to diagnose the calf with a mild case of bloat and provide treatment. The farmer, an old-timer named Pete who had known Maya since she opened her practice, watched the whole procedure with interest. "Teamwork," Pete commented approvingly as they finished. "Smart approach, Doc. You've got the knowledge. Jake's got the steady hands. Makes sense." After Pete left with his healthy calf, Maya sat down in her office chair, feeling both accomplished and exhausted. "Thank you," she said to Jake. "I couldn't have done that alone today." "You did the important part," Jake replied. "You made the diagnosis and determined the treatment. I just provided an extra set of hands. Is this what your sister had to learn? How to accept help without feeling like a failure?" Jake nodded. "It took her a while. She had to change how she worked as a nurse, too. Instead of doing 12-hour shifts on her feet, she moved to a position where she could sit more and focus on patient education. Different, but still valuable." Maya thought about this as Jake prepared to leave. Maybe the key wasn't trying to do everything exactly the way she used to. Maybe it was finding new ways to use her skills and knowledge, even if those ways looked different than before. That evening, Maya called Dr. Rodriguez to discuss her experience at the clinic. "It sounds like you're learning to adapt," the doctor said approvingly. "That's actually a very positive sign. Many lupus patients struggle with the idea that they have to do things differently, but adaptation is often the key to maintaining quality of life." "What if I have more bad days than good days?" Maya asked. "Then you'll deal with the bad days when they come and make the most of the good days. The goal isn't to eliminate all symptoms. That's usually not realistic with lupus. The goal is to find a way to live well with the condition." After hanging up, Maya sat on her couch thinking about everything that had changed in the past month. A few weeks ago, she had been convinced that lupus meant the end of her career and her independence. But maybe Dr. Rodriguez was right. Maybe it didn't have to mean the end of anything. Maybe it just meant learning to do things differently. Outside, it was starting to snow again. Maya knew that Jake would be there in the morning, ready to help with whatever needed to be done. For the first time since her diagnosis, instead of feeling guilty about needing help, she felt grateful for having it. She thought about Jake's sister Rebecca, working as a teacher in Colorado, living a full life 15 years after her lupus diagnosis. Maybe that could be her future too. Different from what she had planned, but still meaningful, still worth fighting for. Maya took her evening medications and went to bed early, something she was learning to do without guilt. Tomorrow might be a good day or a bad day. There was no way to predict with lupus. For 3 months, Maya's new routine worked well. She had good days and bad days, but the good days were starting to outnumber the bad ones. She was working at the clinic about 4 hours a day, handling diagnostics and consultations while Jake or Jenny helped with the physical examinations when her hands weren't cooperating. Maya was starting to believe she had found her new normal. The medication seemed to be working, She was learning to pace herself, and with Jake's help, she was maintaining both her home and her practice. She even started thinking about the future again, making plans for spring and considering expanding her diagnostic services. Then February arrived with a vengeance. It started with what Maya thought was just a cold. She felt tired and achy, symptoms that weren't unusual for her anymore. But instead of getting better after a few days, she got worse. Much worse. The joint pain that had been manageable became excruciating. Her hands swelled so badly she couldn't hold a coffee cup, let alone examine an animal. The fatigue was overwhelming. She would fall asleep sitting up and wake up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Worst of all, she started running a fever that wouldn't break no matter what she tried. Jake found her one morning collapsed on her kitchen floor, too weak to get up after falling when her legs gave out. "We're going to the hospital," he said firmly, helping her to his truck. "It's just a flare," Maya protested weakly. "I'll be fine in a few days." But Jake had already seen what a regular flare looked like, and this was something different, something scarier. At the emergency room, the doctors took one look at Maya's blood work and immediately admitted her. Her kidney function was declining rapidly, and her white blood cell count was dangerously low. Dr. Rodriguez was called in, and her worried expression told Maya everything she needed to know. "This is what we call a lupus crisis," Dr. Rodriguez explained gently. "Sometimes the disease becomes very aggressive very quickly. Your kidneys are being affected, which we call lupus nephritis. We need to start intensive treatment right away." Maya felt the world spinning around her. "Are my kidneys failing?" "They're under severe stress. We're going to start you on high-dose steroids and immunosuppressive drugs to try to get the inflammation under control. But I won't lie to you, Maya, this is serious." The next few days passed in a blur of IV medications, constant monitoring, and increasing weakness. Maya's body was fighting itself so aggressively that even the strongest medication seemed to barely make a dent. The doctors spoke in worried whispers about dialysis and long-term kidney damage. Jake rarely left the hospital. He slept in the uncomfortable chair next to Maya's bed, brought her ice chips when her mouth was too dry to swallow, and held her hand during the worst moments when the pain was so bad she couldn't think straight. "You should go home," Maya whispered one evening when she was feeling slightly more alert. "You're going to lose your job." "Already talked to my boss," Jake said quietly. "He understands. You're more important than any job." Maya started to cry, something that had been happening a lot lately. The high-dose steroids made her emotions unpredictable, swinging from hope to despair in minutes. "I'm scared, Jake. I feel like I'm disappearing." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "You're still here. You're still fighting. What if I can't fight anymore? What if this is how my father felt at the end?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward in his chair, his voice steady and sure. "Do you remember what you told me about why you became a veterinarian?" Maya nodded weakly. She had shared that story with him a few weeks earlier, during one of their quiet conversations while he helped around her property. "You said you became a vet because animals can't advocate for themselves when they're sick. They need someone to speak for them, to fight for them when they can't fight for themselves." "Yeah, so right now you're the sick animal, and I'm your advocate. I'm here to fight for you when you can't fight for yourself." Maya felt fresh tears on her cheeks, but these were different. Not tears of despair, but tears of something she was afraid to name. "Jake, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm telling you. You don't get to give up, not while I'm here, not while there are still treatments to try, still hope to hold on to." Dr. Rodriguez came in the next morning with a new treatment plan. Maya's kidneys had stabilized, but they weren't improving. She wanted to try an experimental drug combination that might help, but it came with significant risks. The medications could suppress your immune system even more, leaving you vulnerable to serious infections, she explained. But without them, the kidney damage could become permanent. Maya felt overwhelmed by the decision. Everything felt too big, too complicated, too scary to handle. "What would you do?" she asked Dr. Rodriguez. "I would try the treatment. You're young and otherwise healthy. Your body has a good chance of responding well." Maya looked at Jake, who was listening intently to every word. "What do you think?" she asked him. "I think we don't give up when there are still options to try," he said simply. Maya agreed to the experimental treatment, and the next week was the hardest of her life. The new medications made her violently ill. She couldn't keep food down. Her hair started falling out. and she developed mouth sores that made it painful to talk. There were moments when Maya wanted to stop everything, to tell the doctors she was done fighting. She watched other patients in the ward, some of whom seemed to be suffering without any hope of improvement, and wondered if she was just prolonging the inevitable. But every time she started to lose hope, Jake was there. He researched her medications online, asking the doctors intelligent questions about side effects and alternatives. He brought her books to read when she was feeling up to it, and sat quietly beside her when she wasn't. He never tried to minimize her fears or tell her everything would be fine. Instead, he acknowledged how hard it was while insisting that they would face it together. "I've been thinking about Rebecca." Jake said one particularly bad day when Maya was too weak to lift her head off the pillow. "What about her?" "She told me once that the worst part of lupus wasn't the physical pain. It was feeling like she had become someone different, someone smaller and weaker than who she used to be." Maya knew exactly what he meant. She felt like the person she used to be, the confident veterinarian who could handle any emergency, had disappeared completely. How did she deal with that? She realized she wasn't smaller. She was just different. The illness had taken some things away, but it had also given her some things. Compassion for other people going through hard times. Appreciation for good days. The ability to ask for help and let people care about her. Maya thought about this. Before lupus, she had been so focused on being independent that she had kept most people at arm's length. She had friends, but not close ones. She had colleagues, but no real confidants. In some ways, getting sick had brought people into her life in a way that being healthy never had. "You think I'm a different person now?" she asked Jake. "I think you're the same person, just dealing with different circumstances. You're still the woman who drove through a blizzard to deliver a foal. You're still the veterinarian who spent 4 hours saving my horse. You're just also someone who has lupus." 2 weeks into the experimental treatment, Maya's lab results showed the first signs of improvement. Her kidney function was stabilizing, and the inflammatory markers in her blood were starting to come down. It wasn't a cure, and Dr. Rodriguez warned that there would likely be more flares in the future, but it was progress. "Does this mean I'm going to be okay?" Maya asked. "It means you're responding to treatment, which is very encouraging," Dr. Rodriguez said carefully. "Lupus is unpredictable, and we'll need to monitor you closely for the rest of your life. But yes, I think you're going to be okay." Maya looked at Jake, who was grinning widely for the first time in weeks. "We did it," she said quietly. "You did it," Jake corrected. "You fought for your life, and you won this round." Maya realized he was right. A month ago, when she was at her sickest, she had wanted to give up. She had been ready to stop fighting, to let the disease win. But somehow, with Jake's support and her own stubborn determination, she had pushed through the worst of it. "Jake, I need to tell you something," she said as they prepared for her discharge from the hospital. "What's that?" "I couldn't have done this without you. Not just the practical help, but the emotional support. You kept me going when I wanted to quit." Jake looked uncomfortable with the praise. "You would have found a way. You're stronger than you think." "Maybe, but I didn't have to find out because you were there." As they drove home from the hospital, Maya looked out at the Montana landscape she loved so much. The mountains were still snow-covered, but there were signs of spring everywhere. Longer days, birds returning, the promise of new growth after the long winter. Maya felt like she was emerging from her own long winter. The lupus wasn't gone, and there would be more challenges ahead. But she had learned something important during the crisis. She was stronger than she thought, and she didn't have to face the hard times alone. More than that, she had discovered that accepting help didn't make her weak. It made her part of something bigger than herself, part of a community of people who cared about each other and showed up when it mattered. 1 year later, Maya stood in her newly renovated clinic, watching through the large windows as Jake worked with a nervous rescue horse in the corral outside. The spring sunshine was warm on her face, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly content. The clinic looked different now. Maya had made modifications to accommodate her physical limitations while maximizing her ability to help animals. She had installed adjustable height examination tables, added comfortable seating areas for consultations, and created a specialized diagnostic center where she could focus on what she did best, using her knowledge and experience to solve complex medical puzzles. The business was thriving in ways Maya had never expected. Word had spread about her innovative approach to veterinary care, combining traditional hands-on treatment with detailed diagnostic work. Veterinarians from neighboring counties had started referring difficult cases to her, and she had hired 2 part-time assistants to help with the increased workload. But the biggest change wasn't in the clinic, it was in Maya herself. The woman who had once insisted on doing everything alone now worked as part of a team. Jake had become her unofficial partner, handling much of the physical examination work while Maya provided the medical expertise. They had developed an almost telepathic communication during procedures, able to work together seamlessly to provide the best possible care for their patients. Jenny had been promoted to practice manager and was taking online courses in veterinary technology. The clinic had also partnered with a mobile veterinary service to handle large animal emergencies when Maya wasn't feeling up to the physical demands of farm calls. Most importantly, Maya had learned to listen to her body instead of fighting against it. She worked shorter days but was more productive during those hours. She took breaks when she needed them without feeling guilty. She had adjusted her schedule to account for the unpredictable nature of lupus, building flexibility into her life. Instead of trying to maintain the rigid control she had once thought was necessary, the lupus was still there. It always would be. Maya had learned to think of it as an unwelcome roommate she had to live with, something that would occasionally cause problems but didn't get to dictate the terms of her life. She had flares sometimes, days when the pain and fatigue made work impossible, but she also had long stretches of feeling good, periods when she almost forgot she was sick. The experimental treatment had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. Maya's kidney function had returned to nearly normal levels, and her overall health had stabilized. She would always need to take medications and have regular monitoring, but the life-threatening crisis of the previous winter felt like something that had happened to someone else. On this particular afternoon, Maya was reviewing lab results for a complicated case when she heard Jake's truck pull into the driveway. She looked up to see him walking toward the clinic, his hat in his hands and an unusually serious expression on his face. "Got a minute to talk?" he asked when he came inside. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Jake sat down across from her desk, fidgeting with his hat. Maya had seen him handle 1,000-pound bulls with confidence, but right now he looked nervous as a teenager. "Maya, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Over the past year, her relationship with Jake had evolved far beyond the practical partnership it had started as. Somewhere between the morning chores and the late-night conversations, between the medical emergencies and the quiet moments of recovery, they had become something more. But neither of them had acknowledged it out loud. "When I first started helping you," Jake continued, "I told myself it was just the right thing to do, returning a favor, helping a neighbor in need. But that wasn't the whole truth." Maya waited, afraid to interrupt. "The truth is, I've been interested in you for years, since the first time I brought Thunder to your clinic. But you were always so professional, so self-sufficient. I figured you wouldn't be interested in someone like me." "Someone like you?" Jake shrugged. "A cowboy who never went to college, who smells like horses more often than not, who doesn't have much to offer besides hard work and good intentions." Maya stared at him in amazement. "Jake, you saved my life. Not just medically, but in every way that matters. How can you think you don't have anything to offer?" "I know I helped during the crisis," Jake said. "But now that you're doing better, now that you got your life back on track, I keep wondering if you still need someone like me around." Maya stood up and walked around her desk to where Jake was sitting. She took his hands in hers, noting how perfectly they fit together despite the difference in size. "Jake Moreau, you are the most generous, patient, loyal person I've ever known. You saw me at my absolute worst and never flinched. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, and you helped me find a way to live with lupus instead of just surviving it." Jake looked up at her, hope beginning to replace the uncertainty in his eyes. "More than that," Maya continued, "you showed me that accepting help doesn't make me weak, that depending on someone doesn't mean losing myself, that love isn't about being protected from life's challenges, but about having someone stand beside you while you face them." "Love?" Jake repeated quietly. Maya felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't back down. Yes, love, because that's what this is, isn't it? What we've built together over this past year. Jake stood up and took her face gently in his hands. I've been in love with you since that morning. You cried in your kitchen and trusted me enough to tell me the truth about what you were going through. When Jake kissed her, Maya felt something click into place like a puzzle piece she hadn't even known was missing. This wasn't the desperate romance of youth or the passionate intensity of a summer fling. This was something deeper and more lasting. A love built on shared struggles, mutual respect, and the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. So what happens now? Maya asked when they broke apart. Jake smiled, the first truly relaxed smile she had seen from him all day. Now we figure out what comes next. Together, 6 months later, Maya and Jake were married in the meadow behind. Her house, surrounded by friends from town and family who had traveled from across the country to celebrate with them. Rebecca came from Colorado with her husband and children, and Maya finally got to meet the woman whose example had given Jake the roadmap for helping someone through lupus. He never told you the whole story, Rebecca confided during the reception. Jake was the one who held our family together when I was first diagnosed. He researched treatments, drove me to appointments, and refused to let anyone treat me like I was dying. He saved my life just as much as any doctor did. Maya looked across the meadow to where Jake was dancing with her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, making the old woman laugh with his surprisingly graceful moves. He saved mine too, Maya said simply. The wedding was small but perfect, with horses grazing peacefully in the background and the Montana mountains standing sentinel over the celebration. Maya wore a simple dress that accommodated the joint swelling she still experienced sometimes, and Jake wore his best boots and a smile that could have powered the whole town. During their vows, Maya spoke about finding strength she never knew she had, and Jake talked about the privilege of loving someone brave enough to keep fighting even when the fight seemed impossible. There wasn't a dry eye in the meadow when Jake promised to love Maya, in sickness and in health through flares and remissions, for all the days of our lives. Dr. Rodriguez attended the wedding, and she pulled Maya aside during the reception to tell her how proud she was of her patient's progress. When you were first diagnosed, I was worried about how you would adapt to life with lupus, the doctor admitted. You were so determined to do everything exactly the way you always had. But look at you now. You've created a life that works with your condition instead of against it. Maya looked around at the celebration, at the community of people who had supported her through the hardest time of her life, at the husband who had shown her that love wasn't about being rescued, but about being truly seen and accepted. I almost gave up, Maya said quietly. If Jake hadn't shown up when he did, I think I would have. But you didn't give up, and now you're not just surviving with lupus. You're thriving. You're an inspiration to other patients who are facing similar challenges. Maya thought about the letters she had been receiving lately from people newly diagnosed with lupus, people who had heard her story and wanted to know how she had found hope again. She had started writing back to each one, sharing what she had learned about living with chronic illness while maintaining purpose and joy. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Maya and Jake sat on their porch swing, watching the stars come out over the mountains. Maya's wedding dress was grass-stained from dancing, and Jake's tie was long gone, but neither of them had ever been happier. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten sick? Maya asked, her head resting on Jake's shoulder. Sometimes, Jake admitted. But then I remember that we might never have really gotten to know each other. You were always so independent, so focused on your work. And I was too intimidated by your education and success to think you'd be interested in a simple cowboy.